In less than 50 years, countries using nuclear energy have buried over 100,000 metric tons of waste in various oceans. The radioactive contamination continues to spread.
Even though we're living in the desert, there's enough water that gets into the soil will move this waste into the groundwater. And for hundreds of thousands of years, the groundwater beneath the site would be toxic.
In 2002, an official report made for the American Department of Energy announced that strontium-90, a radioactive element, is present in Columbia River fish. 13 out of 15 fish caught around the site are contaminated. Eating them regularly multiplies the probability of having a cancer.
The levels of lead in the atmosphere have been elevated for the last 4,500 years. All of it is due to human activity. You can see the rise and fall of the Greek and Roman empires, the dip caused by the Black Death in the 1300s, and of course the spike in the 20th century due to industrialization and tetraethyl lead. He expected to find modern Americans had about 100 times as much lead in their bones. 20th century Americans had 1,000 times more lead in their bones than their ancestors. Studies of baby teeth revealed that even lead exposure well below the level considered safe resulted in delayed learning, decreased IQ, and increased behavioral problems.
And there is a broad consensus on the part of everybody except the lead industry and its spokesman that lead is extremely toxic at extremely low doses.
A follow-up study showed that those with higher levels of lead in their baby teeth were many times more likely to fail out of high school. As a result of studies like these, the CDC's guidelines for the acceptable level of lead in children's blood dropped from 60 micrograms per deciliter down to 3.5. And as far as we know today, there is no safe level of lead. Globally, lead is believed to be responsible for nearly 2/3 of all unexplained intellectual disability. According to a study published in 2022, more than half of the current U.S. population, that's 170 million people, were exposed to high levels of lead in early childhood. Those born between 1951 and 1980 are disproportionately affected. The authors estimate that in aggregate, lead caused a loss of more than 800 million IQ points. The world is less intelligent today because of leaded gasoline. But there are even more troubling correlations. The U.S. saw a steady rise in crime from the 1970s to the 1990s. Then it abruptly declined. This graph looks eerily similar to a plot of preschool blood lead levels, just offset by 20 years. The obvious question is, did kids who were exposed to higher levels of lead grow up to commit more crimes than they otherwise would have? You might think this is just a spurious correlation, but the same pattern appears in many countries, including Britain, Canada, and Australia. And we know there's a causal connection between lead exposure and antisocial or violent behavior. A study of 340 teenagers found that those who were arrested were 4 times as likely to have elevated lead in their bones than similar demographic controls who didn't have run-ins with the law. Now, this doesn't mean that lead is responsible for all of the increase in crime, but it's very likely responsible for some of it. Now, it's tough to estimate the precise death toll of lead. One of its lesser-known effects is a hardening of the arteries, leading to increased cardiovascular disease. A study from 2018 found lead was likely responsible for 250,000 heart disease deaths per year in the U.S. Assuming a constant rate over the past century, that amounts to 25 million deaths in the U.S. alone. Globally, the figure may approach 100 million. Most of those deaths are due to Midgley's decision to put lead in gasoline, a substance he knew firsthand was toxic, but he did it anyway to maximize profits. And the problem is not over. Current estimates of deaths caused by lead range from 500 to 900,000 per year. 2020 UNICEF report warns that 1 in 3 children globally, that's over 800 million children, have blood lead levels at or above 5 micrograms per deciliter. A lot of this lead now comes from batteries and industrial processes, but some is still due to Midgley's invention.
Painkillers, blood thinners, and chemotherapy drugs are just some of the substances that are found in your drinking water. There's new information that some drugs are ending up in our water at levels never seen before.
If they're downstream from a sewage treatment plant, the male fish turn into females.
If you expose them to wastewater, they will feminize. They will have eggs in the testes.
What's causing the males to develop eggs? Human hormones, residue from prescription drugs that are flushed into the river. Using new highly sensitive equipment, scientists are finding an increasing variety of prescription drugs in the water.
We know that air pollution in particular is linked to a number of adverse health outcomes: kidney disease, heart disease, chronic respiratory infections, lung cancer, and all of those can lead to premature death.
Pollution caused nearly 9 million deaths across the world in 2019.